All right, we're a little delayed here in getting to Sam because we've had so much to chat about. He was at the game as a fan on Saturday, so we just saluted our best of the weekend, the atmosphere. You were in it. What was it like?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was intense. And I remember saying last week on a different show that I couldn't remember. I was trying to think off the top of my head. I couldn't remember the last time I went to a college football game just as a spectator
Yeah.
and not working it and just enjoying it. And so tailgating was great. The atmosphere in the stands was great. It was loud. I had some Bison fans around me, yelling "Run Power" and calling for the offensive coordinator to get fired. Like it was the whole shebang, the whole experience. It was great. And the game was for three quarters was kind of meh, but still very, very intense. And
Yep.
then obviously fireworks happened there in the fourth quarter, kind of on both sides with, South Dakota State had opportunities to seal that win. They didn't make the plays and NDSU made the plays. And then, Bison got to get the ball back. And, that last drive, I know you were highlighting it in your previous segment. That's going to go down as one of the most memorable drives in NDSU history, I think.
You were there for the Carson to RJ. It seemed really similar on the Cam Miller to Raja Nelson catch. Other end zone or other side of that same end zone that happened on Saturday night.
Yeah, I remember that RJ catch because I was in the press box for that one. It looked very similar.
Now,
Pretty. The one in 2014 was probably better coverage wise. RJ was blanketed. It was just a
yep.
good throw. On this one, Raja had a step. And so it was. I thought it was a great play call because they probably saw one-on-one coverage with the safety, and that safety isn't as good in coverage. He's more of a run stopper. And initially out of that timeout, you thought, okay, NDSU is going to bleed the clock, kick the game-winning field goal as time expires, like to throw that shot. Because if it's incomplete, then, clock stops. You're at 2nd and 10 or 3rd and 10, whatever it was. So I thought it was a
Yeah.
great play call, a gutsy play call, great catch, great throw, obviously. Just a big-time moment there.
The Jacks seemed out of, I don't know what the right word is, out of sorts on offense. From you watching the game where you were at, what was the Bison defense was really good. I thought really good, but they just seemed like they were just out of, I didn't know what they were doing offensively Saturday night.
Yeah, it just seemed like really both teams were feeling each other out in the first quarter. And then that kind of bled into the second quarter. And then it got into, I think it was maybe just kind of like the game flow of things where both defenses were playing so well that even into the third quarter, both South Dakota State and North Dakota State, like it didn't seem like no one wanted to throw like that first big punch. They
Yeah.
were just kind of scared or timid to make a mistake and create a turnover. And so to me on both sides, like we'll start with South Dakota State. It just seemed like they didn't trust Gronowski, or maybe they didn't trust the receivers to get open. I don't know what it was,
Yeah.
but and I thought NDSU did a good game plan where their pass rush was pretty good, but Gronowski kind of seemed to get happy feet where if nothing was there, he was
He
going to
was
scramble
moving.
out of the pocket right away.
Yep.
And NDSU's defensive ends were waiting for them. They weren't necessarily crashing the pocket for NDSU defensive ends. They were just waiting to flush Gronowski out. And so I just felt offensively for South Dakota State that they didn't really trust the passing game as much as they should. And then on NDSU side, it seemed like the Bison were still leaning on the run a little bit too much, just trying to, eventually something's going to break open. And that never happened for the Bison until they opened it up in the passing game on that final drive. And then things really got going. So I still think both offenses are good.
Yeah.
I know some other observers were saying all these offenses are awful. I just think it was the game flow. And I think both OCs just kind of got into the mindset of, I don't want to make a mistake here. Let's just be careful, let our defense win the game for us. And, NDSU was the one that eventually made those plays on offense.
If I would have told you last Monday the Jacks will have 0 possessions in the red zone, I could have bet you $1 million. No one would have believed that.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even think of that,
Yeah.
until
0.
now. But yeah, they had the long field goal, long touchdown run. So, NDSU's defense played great, and NDSU was already without maybe 4 defensive starters if you count Wisniewski,
Yeah.
and then I think 2 more
Correct.
went down with Young, who was really playing well, and then Benson probably had the best game of his career, just off the top of my head. And so to still play to that level defensively, I thought was really impressive.
Yeah, that one I'm just going to shake my head over forever. That they had never got the ball inside the 20 is stunning to me. You're right, though. It seemed like SDSU's that Ryan Olson, the offensive coordinator, I don't know if he didn't trust his guys because Griffin Willey's a playmaker. Graham Gorey's a playmaker. The Johnsons never really got going. That was I just shake my head at that. I wouldn't have believed that if you told me that Friday.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that like NDSU sold out to stop the run, but that was
No.
no doubt NDSU's focus was to stop the run. So it's not like there wasn't any one-on-one opportunities out there for South Dakota State, and whether it was just receivers not getting open or maybe the scheme. Sometimes if you don't have great route runners, you can scheme things up
Yep.
to get those guys open. Yeah, Wilde didn't have a touch for a while, and again, it's kind of been this case for a lot of this year with the passing game, and they just seem an inch off here or there, whether it's the route, whether it's the throws. I mean. Gronowski had his tight end wide open, in the fourth quarter there, and had they connected, that probably would have been game over. But he overthrew him slightly. I
Yep.
don't know if he thought the tight end was going to turn the other way to kind of lead him in the other way. Then there was the catch by Goring, at the 2 yard line. And I think what I heard was that the refs thought his foot was in, but as he was kind of bringing the ball down, it
Correct.
juggled a little bit. So if you catch it and you secure it, they're going to overrule that as a catch, and you're at the 2 yard
Yep.
line. You probably win that game for South Dakota State. But again, in games like this, some teams make those big plays, other teams, don't make those big plays, and NDSU was the one that made those big plays to get a big win.
And Jimmy Rogers said in the post game that they even went to the ref assist and they said he did not complete the catch on the
Mhm.
Goring one at the end. That's why it wasn't reviewed. He said, "Don't waste it." The rest told him, "Do not you spend a timeout. We've already looked at it. He didn't complete it." And you saw that. I even watched it again this morning because I had Jackrabbit fans tweeting at me the photo of Goring's foot in bounds with the ball catching it, but that didn't tell the whole. He didn't complete it. You got same thing with the Bryce Lance one down the sideline in the first half. He didn't complete the
Yeah.
process of the catch.
And even that, I think it was the same drive where it was like 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, and then Gronowski hit, I believe it was Goring down the seam for a big first down. Even watching the replay, like he almost dropped that one at
Yep.
the end of it. I remember watching it in the dome and being like, he almost dropped that. Like
Yep.
as he was going to the ground, he was kind of juggling a little bit. And so I mean, Wilde is a stud, even though he didn't
Yes.
necessarily show it, on Saturday. But I think South Dakota State fans and coaches are waiting for Goring to really get going. And he's shown the ability to have some big plays and really good catches, but there's also some inconsistency there with some drops. And so that was a key. He didn't drop it, but he didn't, at the 2 yard line, he
Right.
did secure it. Had he done that, it could have been a different story.
All right, let's peel this off now going forward. Let's start with the Jacks, who have a monster game again this week, prime time at home with South Dakota. And you and I have been talking about this for, I think, 5 weeks. How good is South Dakota? Well, we're going to find out now because this is a monstrous game Saturday night.
It is, yeah, and it's going to tell us a lot about both teams.
Yes.
And I think had South Dakota State made those plays and won this game, you could maybe circle this and be like, okay, after an emotional win, this could be a trap game for South Dakota State, even though it is at home. But with the Jacks losing, motivation is obviously going to be high, and they know for their long-term goals, like they can't drop another game or else they're really going to fall back. And so I still like my and I wrote this in my top 25 ballot. Like my mind hasn't really changed about NDSU, Montana State, and South Dakota State. Like I still think they're in a tier above themselves. I think they're pretty on par with each other. But now after that loss by South Dakota State, their path gets tougher to win a national title because they're going
Yes.
to have to go on the road. Meanwhile, NDSU's path, gets easier in a sense because they could secure, home field advantage. And so I still think South Dakota State is a legit title, that this loss could be the difference between hosting in the semifinals or going on the road in the semifinals.
Now, the poll's going to come out here in about 10 minutes. You tweeted out you have the Bison 1. I have the Bison 1. Just because you're unbeaten like Montana State, it's not a rubber stamp that you're the number one team. Again, they've played nobody outside of Idaho. That's the only quality win they have. The FBS win over New Mexico is what it is. New Mexico's not very good. Strength of schedule matters, Sam. I hope the voters consider that.
Yeah, it's always fun to see what other fans are saying while they're watching a game. Because during the Dakota Marker game, NDSU and South Dakota State fans were saying these are the two best teams in the country.
Yep.
They're proving it right now, on the field. This is an awesome game. Meanwhile, other fan bases are watching it going, these offenses aren't that good. Like, how are these the top two teams, in the country? And so, to me, I still think North Dakota State is that top team. I have the Bison 1. I have Montana State 2. I have South Dakota State 3.
Yep.
But again, as far as best odds to win the national title, they're all probably pretty even. But if we're ranking things based off of right now, that is probably the most fair order. I mean, the Bison, undefeated versus the FCS. They have 4 ranked wins now. ETSU, UND, Illinois State, South Dakota State. I think their strength of schedule is fifth. South Dakota State's is third. Montana State's is 51st or 52nd,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. Montana State has only 1 ranked win, but they do have an FBS win. Again, in some ways it can't help, who is on their schedule. And they've looked the part and they've dominated FCS opponents, but I still think just with NDSU, their overall resume and then also just having the best win out of anyone right now by
Yeah.
beating the number 1 team, I think that puts the Bison number 1.
Both teams said after the game, we're gonna see each other again. Now, to me, because I had this question, well, would it be in Frisco? I don't think so. I think they'll be put on the same side, Sam, if there's the 2 and the 3, unless something crazy happens with a Jackson and USD that I would see them playing as the 2 and the 3 seed if things play out like they do, that they win out the rest of the way. They're the 2 and the 3 seeds.
Yeah,
I mean, you can make the case.
Really...
You can make the case the Bison go to number 1. You could make that case, but when Montana State being 12-0, they got to be number 1, right?
So last week I projected, I pretty much tipped my hand last week of saying I was going to predict NDSU to win this game because I projected ahead that Montana State was going to be the number 1 playoff seed, NDSU would be 2, South Dakota State would be the number 3 playoff seed. As you kind of look into things a little bit more, it's going to be really close because Montana State, they could be 12-0. They'll have like 3 ranked wins by season's end and then a 4th really good win with an FBS win. But I think by season's end, the Bison could have 6 ranked wins because we forget that Missouri State is now ranked in the coaches poll. So that's now 6 ranked wins compared to Montana State's 4 and then 1 FBS win. Strength of schedule is going to favor the Bison. I think NDSU is going to be number 1 in the polls. And I know the committee doesn't always mirror the polls, but sometimes they kind of do have the same school of thought. And so I think it could be NDSU the 1 seed and then Montana State 2. South Dakota State's 3, and so they could be on opposite sides of the bracket. But it's so funny because last week I think it was a Montana State fan saying, "Oh, they're always going to put NDSU and South Dakota State on the opposite sides of the bracket. They always do that." And I was like,
No.
5 years ago, the opposite was true.
Correct.
They were always on the same side of the bracket. So it's just like fans just have like their narratives that they think this is always how it works, and usually it's clashing narratives that fans have against each other.
My last thing before we got to go, and I'm sorry we ran late here today. If it's not abundantly clear now of the top 3 and everybody else, it was strikingly clear Saturday with the game Saturday night, and then you saw Mercer get blasted by Samford. You saw Villanova lose by 1,000,000 to Maine. Those 2 teams were 6 and 7 in the poll, and they got dusted by teams that aren't even very good. It's clear. It's 1, 2, and 3, and then it's off a cliff.
Yeah, it's hard to really get a good sense of all these teams. And on my ballots, I basically said I ignored what I did last week and I basically started over because not every team, a lot of teams have a bad loss somewhere on their resume, whether it happened 3 weeks ago or last week. Every team from Montana to Mercer, to Villanova to maybe even a team like UIW when they lost to Southern Illinois. Like every team has a loss on there that you can point at and say, how do I rank this team here because of that loss? But that's happened to so many teams where I basically started over. And like to me, like Mercer didn't really change a whole lot, even though they had that bad loss. But at the same time, they're 6 and 1 with 2 ranked wins. Like that stacks up well against a lot of other teams.
Yep.
So I do think, those top 3 have separated themselves. But we'll see with South Dakota because they go to South Dakota State. We'll see how close they are. UC Davis is 7-0 versus the FCS. They host Montana State a week before the brawl. And so I still think there's a separation there, but we're still kind of hanging on to, well, it's these top 3.
Yeah.
We'll see about South Dakota, maybe. We'll see about UC Davis, maybe. So there's still 2 other teams that could maybe factor in, but right now, we've been saying this for weeks. It's those top 3 teams. And if anyone wins the title outside of those top 3 teams, I think a lot of people would be surprised if that happened.
Floored on that. Although Coyote fans keep telling me, and I should say this before we go, that game November the 23rd in Vermillion could be awfully, awfully important, especially if the Coyotes win this weekend in Brookings when the Bison go there to end the season. That could be for everything, frankly.
And I think South Dakota is actually much better than they were last year. I think they're showing great depth. I think the Yotes are playing well offensively. I think they've had some really good players step up defensively. So
Man,
they're better. They're better than the team that beat NDSU and Fargo last year. But NDSU also hammered South Dakota at the end of last year, and so I think that kind of sticks out as well. So that could be for. Yeah, that's it could be for a top four seed
yeah.
if South Dakota were to win that game. But if they're to lose that game, that could be two losses for the Yotes. South Dakota State and North Dakota State, that's going to drop them. So there's going to be a lot on the line for South Dakota. I just think NDSU is playing super well right now, but NDSU's depth is going to be tested
No
because
doubt.
those injuries keep on stacking up. But like they showed against South Dakota State, like not that injuries don't matter because they do, but they have guys ready to step up that maybe aren't as big of a drop off as compared to some past years.
You're the man. Thanks for the time as always. We'll do this again next week, all right?
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Sam Herder, Hero Sports, BetMGM joining us each and every Monday to give us the lowdown on the FCS. The polls coming out here in a bit. I know, but NDSU's not been ranked number 1 in 2 years, folks. So we'll find out here momentarily. We're overdue for a break. We caught up here. Jeff Kolpak coming up in our second hour. Dive more into the Bison game and how badly beat up did they get by getting the Dakota marker back. Hour 1 of Hot Mic. We'll wrap it right after this.